When my daughter-in-law told me, "You've done enough, old man," I didn't reply. I simply smiled, a small, tired smile, the kind you wear when you don't want to argue anymore, and when your heart already knows it has lost its place in someone's home. My name is Kwame. I am 71 years old, and this story, my story, isn't about blame or anger. It's about time, love, and what happens when the people you raised forget that you, too, are still alive inside. I still remember the sound of this house years ago, laughter spilling from the kitchen, my grandchildren running through the hallway, their feet tapping against the wooden floor like small drums of joy, and my son, oh, my son Kofi, standing near the window, reading the morning paper while his wife Amma prepared breakfast. Back then, Amma used to smile at me every morning. "Papa Kwame," she'd say, "you must eat with us. The porridge won't taste right without your company." I'd laugh, pretending to argue, but I always joined them. That's how families grow, through these small, ordinary mornings. I never imagined those mornings would fade, that the laughter would shrink into whispers, that my chair at the table would one day stay empty. When Kofi got married, I was the happiest man alive. He had chosen a strong woman, polite, graceful, and educated. I used to tell everyone, Amma is like the daughter I never had. For many years, that was true. But after Kofi got promoted and they moved into this new house, the one where I now live with them, something began to change, slowly, quietly, not in the way a storm comes, but like the way daylight fades after sunset, so gently that you hardly notice until the dark has already arrived. It started with little things, the teacup left unwashed on the counter, the sighs when I asked too many questions, the way Amma began calling me Papa less often, again, and Father more formally. It's strange how a single word can make you feel like a stranger in your own home. One afternoon I came into the living room and found Amma sitting with her friends. They were laughing, chatting about their work, their children, their plans. I smiled, happy to see life in the house again, and said, "Ladies, let me bring you some tea." But Amma's smile disappeared. "Oh, Papa, no need," she said quickly. Then she turned to her friends and whispered something that made them giggle. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me understand that my kindness had become unnecessary, that my efforts, my old-fashioned ways of showing care, were seen as interruptions. That evening, I sat on the porch alone. The street was quiet, except for the crickets, and I thought, maybe I talk too much. Maybe I should stay out of their way. That was the first night I skipped dinner with them. Nobody called me to the table, and strangely that silence hurt less than I thought it would. Kofi has always been a good man, hard-working, gentle, but also afraid of conflict. He avoids confrontation the way a bird avoids a storm, by flying far away until it passes. He noticed the change. I know he did. He saw how I began eating alone, how Amma's voice softened only when I wasn't around, but he said nothing. Maybe he thought things would fix themselves. Maybe he thought I didn't mind. One evening, when he came home late, I tried to speak to him. "Kofi," I said, "is everything all right with Amma? I feel maybe she is tired of me being here." He looked up, tired eyes under a heavy day. "No, Papa, you're imagining things. Amma loves you." I nodded, but deep inside I knew those were words meant to comfort, not to convince. I began noticing how my presence changed the air in the room. When I entered, conversations paused for a heartbeat. When I left, laughter resumed. Once, I overheard Amma talking on the phone. "He's old, yes, but he's strong. He can take care of himself." She said it kindly, but my heart caught that line like a thorn. Old, strong, as if those two words meant I no longer needed family. So I started waking up earlier than everyone else. I'd sweep the front yard, make tea, and sit outside, watching the sunrise paint the sky. Sometimes I'd talk to my late wife in my heart. "Ajoa," I'd whisper, "if you were here, you'd know what to say." But silence was all I heard back. The only light that kept my days warm was my grandchildren, Isi and Kojo. They adored me. Every afternoon they'd rush into my room shouting, "Grandpa, tell us a story." I'd tell them stories from my youth, about growing up in the village, catching fireflies, dancing under the rain. They'd laugh and beg for more. But one evening, Amma stood at the door and said, "Children, let Grandpa rest. He's too old for games." Essie frowned. "But Grandpa never says no." Amma smiled tightly. "Still, let him sleep." After that, they came less often. Maybe she told them not to disturb me. Maybe they just followed her tone. Either way, my room became quiet again, like an old church after prayer. It was the town's annual harvest festival, a big day for our community. In the morning, I dressed in my best shirt, ready to join Kofi and Amma at the celebration. But as I stepped out of my room, I saw them already at the door, dressed beautifully, the children holding baskets of fruit. Amma looked at me, surprised. "Oh, Papa, we didn't think you'd want to come. The crowd, the noise, it's too much for you." I smiled. "It's Fee, and I'd like to come. I can sit in the shade." She hesitated, then forced a small smile. "All right, but we're leaving now." On the way, nobody spoke much. At the festival, they walked ahead, talking with neighbors. I followed behind, smiling politely, but feeling like a shadow. Later, when I turned to look for them, they were gone. I found them sitting at a long table with friends. There was no chair left beside them. So I sat alone near the tree, eating roasted corn, listening to laughter that no longer included me. And yet I smiled, because that's what old men do when their hearts ache. They smile so no one else feels guilty. That evening, after everyone returned home, Amma came to my door. She looked nervous, her hands twisting the edge of her shawl. "Papa," she said softly, "we need to talk." I nodded. I already knew. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even sound angry. Just tired. "You've done enough, old man," she said gently. "You've raised your son. You've worked all your life. It's time to rest. Maybe go back to the village for a while. We'll visit." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Go back? To the house I built with my late wife, the one that's been empty for years? I felt something deep inside me crumble, like an old wall giving way to time. But instead of crying, I smiled, because in that moment I realized she truly believed she was being kind. I smiled because anger would only hurt my son. I smiled because I didn't want the children to see me cry. I smiled because maybe she was right. Maybe I had done enough. But when she left and I sat alone in that dim room, I whispered to myself, if this is rest, then why does it feel so cold? Outside, I heard the sound of laughter from the living room. Inside, I only had the company of silence. That night, I packed a small bag, just a few clothes, my prayer beads, and an old photo of my wife. I didn't plan to leave yet, but I wanted to be ready, just in case tomorrow they truly meant it. That night, sleep did not come easily. I turned on my small bedside lamp and stared at the packed bag on the chair. A simple brown bag that suddenly looked heavier than a mountain. It held only clothes, a comb, a small bottle of oil, my Bible, and the photograph of Ajoa, my late wife. But what it really carried were 50 years of memory. I thought about how she would have handled this. Ajoa had a way of softening hearts. She could turn even harsh words into something gentle. If she were here, she would have spoken to Amma. She would have found a way to remind her that love does not expire with age. But I am not Ajoa. I am just an old man who talks too slowly for a world that moves too fast. When the sun came up, the house was quiet. Kofi had already gone to work. Amma was in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing breakfast for the children. The smell of fried plantain filled the air, sweet, familiar, almost forgiving. I walked in quietly. She looked up, surprised. "Papa, you're awake early," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I couldn't sleep much." She nodded and went back to cooking. I wanted to tell her I wasn't angry, that I understood, but the words stayed trapped inside me like birds afraid to leave the cage. When she placed the food on the table, she said softly, "I didn't mean to hurt you last night. I just think you'll be happier back home. There's space, peace. You'll rest properly." I smiled. "I see," I said. "Maybe you're right." But inside I whispered, "Rest is only peaceful when you are not lonely." A week passed. The house continued as if nothing had happened, but I knew what was coming. The silence between Amma and me had become polite, not hostile, just empty. So one morning, before anyone woke up, I left a short note on the table. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. Take care of the children. Love, Papa Kwame." I carried my brown bag and stepped outside before the first light touched the sky. The air was cool. The street dogs were still sleeping, and I began to walk. No one saw me leave. No one called my name. Sometimes departures are not dramatic. They are just quiet footsteps fading into dawn. The bus station was already busy. Mothers with children, young men with dreams, old women selling boiled eggs. I bought a ticket to my village, a small place 3 hours away. As the bus started moving, I looked out of the window. The city lights melted into fields and trees, and with every mile, I felt both lighter and lonelier. I remembered the day I left that same village 40 years ago to find work in the city. I had promised Ajoa, "One day when we're old, we'll go back and sit under the mango tree again." Now, I was going back, but alone. When I reached the village, the road was dusty but familiar. Children played barefoot, chasing chickens. An old woman at the market called out, "Hey, Kwame, you're back?" I smiled and nodded. "Yes, sister, for a little while." My old house stood at the edge of the village, quiet and covered in vines. The paint had faded, the windows were cracked, but when I opened the door, the scent of old wood and memories wrapped around me like a blanket. I set down my bag and looked at the wall where Ajoa's picture still hung. The glass was dusty. I wiped it with my sleeve and whispered, "I'm home." That night I sat on the veranda with a cup of tea, listening to the crickets. The stars above were brighter than I remembered, but the silence, it was heavy, like a friend who had forgotten how to speak. In the first few weeks I kept expecting a call, maybe from Kofi, asking if I reached safely, or from Amma, checking if I needed anything. Days passed, then weeks. No one called. I told myself they must be busy. Work, school, life. These things fill the calendar quickly. But still, every evening I would sit by the small wooden table, staring at my silent phone. Sometimes I'd dial Kofi's number, then hang up before it rang. I didn't want to sound needy. I just wanted to hear his voice, even for a second. There was a young boy in the village named Kojo Mensa, about 12 years old. He lived with his grandmother. Every morning he'd walk past my gate and wave. "Good morning, Grandpa Kwame," he'd shout. At first I just nodded. Then one day I called him over. "Kojo, come have some mangoes." That became our little tradition. He'd visit after school and I'd tell him stories, the same way I once did with my grandchildren. He'd listen with wide eyes, laughing, asking questions, dreaming out loud. And for the first time in months, my house had laughter again. It was smaller, softer, but it filled the air like sunlight. After 2 months, I decided to write to Kofi. A simple letter. Nothing emotional, just a father's note. "My son, I am doing well here. The house is old, but it holds many memories. There is a young boy here who reminds me of Kojo. I hope you are all fine. Tell Amma I wish her peace. Love, Papa." I sent it through the post office and waited. A week passed, then another, still nothing. It's strange how silence can be louder than any words. Around that time, the harvest season began again in the village. Everyone was busy. I helped the neighbors collect maize, just to feel useful. They'd laugh and say, "Papa Kwame, you're too strong for your age." But inside I felt every ache, every reminder of how time moves without permission. One evening, Kojo came running with his phone. "Grandpa Kwame, look! I found your son's name on the internet. He works for a big company." I smiled. "Yes, that's him." "Will he visit you soon?" he asked. I paused. "I don't know, child, but I hope so." He looked puzzled. "Why wouldn't he? You're his father." I smiled again, the same tired smile. "Sometimes life teaches us to love quietly, Kojo." That night, I had a dream. I was sitting under the mango tree with Ajoa. She was wearing her favorite yellow dress. The wind was soft, carrying the smell of ripe fruit. She looked at me and said, "Kwame, don't close your heart. The story isn't finished yet." When I woke up, the morning light was shining directly on her photograph. It felt like a message. So I decided I would not let my heart grow bitter. I would keep living, simply, gently, with gratitude. It was a Saturday afternoon when I heard the knock on my door, 3 soft taps. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, a young man stood there, holding an envelope. "Are you Mr. Kwame?" he asked. "Yes, I am." He handed me the envelope. "It's from the city," he said. "A woman named Amma." My heart stopped for a moment. I took the envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you, son," I whispered. After he left, I sat down slowly, staring at the letter. For a long moment, I couldn't open it. Part of me was afraid of what it might say. But finally, I did. Inside was a short note written in Amma's careful handwriting. "Papa, I'm sorry it took this long. The children ask about you often. Kofi has been unwell. We wanted to come see you, but things have been difficult. Please don't think we've forgotten you. With love, Amma." I read it again and again. The words were few, but they warmed something inside me, something that had been cold for too long. That evening I sat on the veranda, holding the letter close to my heart. The air felt different. The wind was gentle, like forgiveness moving through the trees. Maybe she hadn't meant to push me away. Maybe life had simply become too heavy for her, too fast. And maybe, just maybe, love never truly disappears. It just hides under the noise of everyday life, waiting for silence to bring it back. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Ajoa, maybe the story isn't finished after all." 2 weeks passed after Amma's letter arrived. Each day I read it again before bed, tracing the letters with my fingers as if they were a bridge between 2 worlds, the city and my little village. Something inside me had shifted. Where there had been bitterness, there was now space. Not peace yet, but something close. It was a warm afternoon when I saw a cloud of dust on the road. In the village, that's how you know someone is coming. Before you see them, you see the dust their car leaves behind. I shaded my eyes and squinted into the sunlight. Then I saw it, a silver car, slowing down near my gate. My heart began to beat faster, like it hadn't in years. The door opened, and out stepped Amma, dressed in a simple Brie-owned dress. Behind her, Kofi climbed out slowly, his face thinner than I remembered. The 2 children, my grandchildren, followed, holding a small basket of fruit. For a moment, I just stood there. Then Amma whispered, "Papa." And that one word carried every apology she had ever meant to say. We didn't rush toward each other. We just stood still, like people seeing ghosts. Then I nodded and said softly, "You found the way." She nodded back. "Yes, Papa. We found the way." Kofi smiled weakly. Papa, I hope you're not angry. I stepped forward and touched his shoulder. I could never be angry with my own blood. Amma's eyes filled with tears. The children looked confused. They had never seen their mother cry. Come, I said. Let's go inside. The sun is hot. Inside the small house, I poured water into cups and set them on the table. The air felt thick with unspoken things. Finally, Kofi broke the silence. Papa, I'm sorry. We should have come sooner. Things haven't been easy. I looked at him closely. His face had lost color. His hands were trembling. Amma said you've been unwell, I said gently. He nodded. I was diagnosed a few months ago. The doctors said I should rest. That's when she panicked. She started working double shifts. Everything became too much. Amma wiped her eyes. I said those words to you. Those cruel words. On a night when I was drowning, Papa. I thought I was protecting my home, when really I was breaking it. The room went silent. I could hear only the birds outside and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Then I said, Amma, my child, when we are in pain, we say things we don't mean, but what matters is that you came back. That evening, Amma cooked in my little kitchen. She moved carefully, as if the walls were sacred. The children played outside, laughing as they chased fireflies. Kofi sat with me on the veranda. He looked at the stars and whispered, I used to think I'd have all the time in the world to make you proud, Papa. Now I just want time to sit with you, quietly. I placed my hand on his. You already made me proud the day you were born, my son. Everything else is a bonus. He smiled faintly, and for a while we just sat there, father and son, watching the night fall like a soft curtain. When Amma brought the food, she served me first, a small gesture, but it spoke louder than words. I said a prayer before we ate, and that meal, humble as it was, felt like forgiveness. The next morning I woke early and found Amma standing outside, staring at the sunrise. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was peace in her face. I don't deserve your kindness, Papa, she said. I smiled. Kindness isn't something we earn. It's something we choose. She nodded slowly. I was so afraid back then. The bills, Kofi's health, the children, everything felt heavy. And you reminded me of what I wasn't doing right. I took my fear out on you. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked toward the horizon, where the light touched the hills. Life has a way of humbling us, Amma, I said. It teaches us what really matters, and it's never the things we chase. Later that day, my grandchildren ran to me with wide smiles. Grandpa, show us the mango tree you planted. Grandpa, tell us about the big fish you caught. Their laughter filled every corner of that old house, and I thought, maybe Ajoa was right in that dream. Maybe the story wasn't finished after all. Amma stood at the doorway watching us. When our eyes met, she whispered, Thank you for not closing your heart. I nodded. Thank you for coming back. 3 days later, it was time for them to go. Kofi hugged me tightly. We'll visit again soon, Papa. I promise. Amma placed her hand over mine. I'll call you every week, she said. No more silence. When the car drove away, I didn't feel the same emptiness as before. This time, the silence felt gentle, like a soft after-rain breeze. I knew they would come back, and even if they didn't, I had already forgiven. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't for others, it's for our own hearts to breathe again. That night, I sat down to write one more letter, but this one I didn't send. I kept it folded in my Bible beside Ajoa's picture. My dear Ajoa, they came back. Amma cried. Kofi smiled again. The children ran through the yard like you used to dream they would. I think you'd be proud. Maybe the story isn't over. Maybe it's just beginning again, in a softer way. Love always, Kwame. I didn't see my daughter-in-law again for months. The house grew quiet after she and my son left for the city. Their laughter, their arguments, even the sound of the baby crying, all of it vanished like smoke after a fire. Some mornings I would still prepare 3 cups of tea out of habit, forgetting there was no one left to share them. Then I would sit down, look at the extra cups, and smile sadly. I never poured them out immediately. I like to imagine that maybe, one day, someone would come through the door again. The neighbors said, "Uncle, you should go live with your brother." But I didn't. I stayed. Because this house, every wall, every chair, every corner, was filled with the memory of my wife. Leaving it felt like abandoning her twice. It was during one long, rainy afternoon that I truly began to understand something. All those years, I believed that love meant providing, fixing, and guiding. I thought being the man of the house meant being in control. But perhaps love isn't control. It's presence. It's patience. It's listening even when you think you already know the answer. I realized I had failed to listen to my son, to his wife, to the small signs of discomfort that had started long before that terrible morning. I remembered how she used to hesitate before speaking, how my son would glance at me nervously before giving his opinion. I had taken it as respect, but maybe it was fear. Fear of disappointing me. That thought hurt more than any insult ever could. One evening, while cleaning an old drawer, I found a small envelope with my name written in my son's handwriting. I had never seen it before. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Baba, I'm sorry for the way things turned out. She didn't mean to hurt you. She was just tired of the arguments, tired of feeling like she couldn't make you happy. I was tired too, but I didn't know how to stand between the two people I love most. We needed space, Baba, but please know, I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love you and her at the same time. Your son, Daniel." The letter was stained, maybe with tears, maybe with time. I read it again and again until I could no longer see the words through the blur of my own tears. That night, for the first time in years, I prayed not for them to return, but for them to be happy, wherever they were. Months later, on a cold Sunday morning, I heard a knock. When I opened the door, a small boy stood there, maybe 5 years old, wearing a red sweater too big for his frame. He looked up at me and said, "Are you Grandpa Kwame?" Before I could answer, I saw Daniel standing behind him, and beside him, yes, her, my daughter-in-law. Her eyes were unsure, guarded, but not angry. Daniel smiled shyly. "Baba," he said softly, "this is your grandson, Kofi." The little boy held out a small toy car and said, "Papa said you fix everything." I bent down, my hands shaking, and took the toy. "Not everything, my boy," I said, "but I can try." And for the first time in a long time, laughter filled my home again. We sat together that evening. No long speeches, no apologies, just quiet company. My daughter-in-law helped me set the table. When she poured tea for me, her hand trembled slightly. I reached out and held her wrist gently. "It's all right," I whispered. "You were right that day." She looked confused. "Right?" "Yes," I said. "You told me I'd done enough. I have. It's time for you two to build your own story. I only wish I had understood that sooner." Her eyes softened. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. Now, when I sit by the window and watch the evening sky fade, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from getting what you want, but from finally letting go of what you can't control. Sometimes I still think about the past, the mistakes, the pride, the silence between us. But then I remember the laughter of my grandson running through the hallway, the smell of dinner being cooked by hands that once pushed me away, and the soft hum of my son fixing the roof with me again. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It doesn't rewrite the story, but it does let you turn the page. If I could leave one message for anyone listening, it would be this. Don't wait until silence becomes your only companion before you learn to say, "I'm sorry." Because sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the same ones who still carry our hearts with them, just waiting for us to open the door.